In this video, we're going to design and set up a newsletter pop-up interaction in Figma. This is the final result, and here are the 4 stages that we're going to go through. In phase 1, we're going to create the basic structure and behavior of this design. In phase 2, we're going to design the static version of this to define how everything will look like. And then we're going to move on to phase 3, where we set everything up and connect everything in prototype mode to get the interactivity that we need. And then finally, in phase 4, we're just going to add a couple neat little tricks, a couple more interactions to make this just a little bit more interesting. With that in mind, let's move on to the first phase and start designing this interaction. So here I am starting with a blank canvas, and what I'm thinking here is that we could create 2 things at first. So keep in mind, I'm just creating the basic outline. I'm just sketching down stuff that I have in mind. We are going to create a page with some text. I'm going to probably put in some lorem ipsum just to have some placeholder text over the entire page to create basically a page where you get like maybe multiple paragraphs, multiple sections, a couple of headlines, just to have something that you can actually scroll through. This will create a tall page that we actually will then use for this purpose. And then very simply, I'm going to also design the actual modal window, which is the window that you're going to see when this thing activates. That's where you'll get the join our newsletter and the form field where you can put your email. And once we have both of these, right, we are then going to go to prototype and set this interaction up. So this is the basic structure. Only one thing is probably missing. To actually make this work, what I'm going to do is create probably an invisible rectangle, an invisible object on top of all the other elements. The reason why we are doing this is because Figma, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have the feature where something happens when you scroll past a certain threshold. You usually have to set this up using hover states, hover interactions. So that's what we are going to do. We're going to create an object that will serve just one basic purpose, and that's it will activate our window, our modal window, when we hover with our mouse over this part of the page. And since we don't want to annoy the user right at the very beginning of the article, right, you want to launch this in a phase where they are more interested in what they're actually reading, right? When there's actually a chance that they might join your newsletter, that's where you want to show them. And usually that's going to be further down the page. That's not going to be at the very beginning. So we are going to position this launch function somewhere around here, like in the middle of the page, or maybe a bit more towards the bottom. Doesn't matter, just not at the beginning nor at the very end. And using this, we will then use this object to activate the window. That's the basic structure that I want to go for, right? So that would be phase 1. Now let's move on to phase 2. So as we have just said, we're going to have a page. So let me design a page. And to do that, I'm going to use my frame tool and create a page that is going to be a lot bigger than what we have created. Actually, it's going to be 1440 by, let's say, I don't know, it's going to be a very long page. So like we can start with this, for example, right? This is going to be our page. And then on this page, we're going to have some text. So let me just use my text tool to create a text field like this, a text object. And I have found some lorem ipsum generator on the web. This is just to have some text placeholder. So let me just paste this in. It's probably going to take a while, right? It's a lot of text, maybe a bit too much. So let me just go somewhere around here with my cursor, and I will probably cut it off about right here. So Command Shift bottom and then delete. So I think this is all that we need, right? I don't think we need any more. So I'm going to press also with this selected Command Option L, which is going to left align the text. By the way, Command Option right is right align and Command Option T is center, but we need left, right? I will also probably go for a font that is serif font. So let's go for Merriweather. And this Merriweather font is probably going to be, yeah, it is going to be 16. But this is not going to be all caps. So let me just turn off the all caps feature. It's also going to be regular, and it's also going to be, the whole object is going to be way more narrow. So I think like this. But after all, this doesn't really matter because, right, this is just a placeholder for us. So let me actually do a few things, and I'm gonna insert a few paragraphs, and then I'm gonna go for like headline 1. Then I'm gonna take this and increase the font size to like 32 maybe, and then increase the height of this to also 32, and make this bolder. And yeah, then I'm just gonna duplicate this across page a few times. So that's gonna be headline 2, or maybe we're gonna remove this paragraph just to have these headlines closer together. Here's, let me also change the color to gray, except for the headlines. This would normally be done through text styles, but since this is for just this one single purpose, I don't think we have to do that really, right? It's just for illustrative purposes basically, right? A simple text with simple headlines. The text is gray and the headlines are black. A very simple design, right? We could also do like a rectangle just to have something that would basically show, you know, a placeholder for the beginning of the article, right? Maybe an image right here, and maybe some details about the article, share buttons and stuff like that. Okay, so this is it. This is what we have, right? Because we're not gonna be working with this anymore, it's just gonna be basically a background. I am going to just shorten this page. I'm gonna select all of these and I'm gonna lock them, right? Like this, so we cannot move them accidentally. So yeah, this is our background. Then let me design the actual pop-up window. So what we need to do here is probably create a frame. This frame is gonna be, I don't know, like let's say 420 by 350, 300, something like that. And the next thing I'm gonna do is actually very simply put in a headline that will say join our newsletter, right? So people will be prompted to join our newsletter. And then I will probably go for like SF Pro. It's gonna be bold or heavy. Again, duplicate this and then type in something like, if you're interested in the topics discussed in the article, you're also going to love our newsletter. Join today or join now. Okay, so this is just a very basic outline of a call to action. So this subheadline is going to be smaller. It's going to be like 16 points, and then it's going to be like narrower, right? Of course, we're going to have to decrease the line height to about 130%, something like that. And we are going to go for like medium, right? That's too heavy. We're going to add some negative, like more like subtract some letter spacing to around -3%. I think that works. Yeah, I'm gonna have to correct this mistake. Make it even smaller maybe. I'm gonna move this all the way over here and then make this text gray, right? I'm gonna probably round the corners a little, just a tiny bit, and then we need to add a few elements. So first of all, when the user is prompted to join the newsletter, logically they're gonna have to have some kind of a form field to type their email into, right? And we're gonna use a frame for that. We're gonna use a frame with a stroke, with a very simple stroke, like a gray one. And then we are going to go for like 1 or 2 points in terms of the stroke width. And it's gonna be, all of that is gonna be aligned towards the left, right? With all the remaining stuff. Then, or maybe there's a better way to do this, and that would be actually duplicating this copy and then typing in your email here, and then we're gonna go to auto width, and then with this text still selected, press Shift A to create an auto layout. We're gonna add some margins, like 16 on each side, and then we're gonna add a stroke. But this stroke, we're just gonna match the color over here, so it's gonna be like gray, like light gray, you know, it's gonna be aligned to the left. Contents of the auto layout, and then we're just gonna extend this, and boom, we got a form field, right? A very simple form field. Now also, we could use the same object, duplicate that by pressing Alt and then dragging, centering all of that into the center, and then we could edit this to say join with all caps, right? And since this is going to be a button, it's going to have to be a bit different than the form field, because this looks very confusing, right? Let me place all of these in a single row. So when you show this to someone, this is very confusing. I mean, this button isn't, first of all, it looked like another form field. Second of all, it's not as prominent to be noticed, which is like a major UX mistake. You want your call to actions to be visible. So let me just add a fill, remove the stroke, and change the fill to black. At the same time, we're gonna select the text and change the color of the text to white. And just to be even more noticeable, let's just change the text to like bold or heavy and maybe add some letter spacing. So in this case, we're gonna go for like 2%. I think that works. Given that we want to keep this really simple, I think we are all set, right? So what I'm gonna do next is just to have this easier. I'm gonna select both of these, press Shift A, and this is gonna group both of these inside an auto layout. Then I'm gonna press Enter. I'm going to press Tab to select the button, right? And this button, that is gonna be fixed in terms of horizontal resizing. But the form field, which is the second element that I can get to by pressing Tab again, that's gonna be fill container. Why are we doing this? That is because when I again go to the auto layout, when I press Shift Enter to select this auto layout, when I change sizes, the form field is the one that is being modified in terms of width, which also means that I should probably set this to fill container, this text, so that when we change sizes, this happens. I mean, this is just an like edge use case. This doesn't really make any sense. It's always gonna have to be at least this wide. So I'm just showing you the features basically, and then we're gonna set the spacing of this auto layout to like 8. So another thing that is very crucial when you're designing interactions, when you're designing user interfaces, is that when there are objects that really belong together, you need to move them close together, right? And definitely closer than other elements. So when I for example do this is also a UX mistake, because now these elements are closer to the copy than to themselves, right? But it's not really like completely illogical, but you want to basically think about the associations that someone might have when navigating a user interface. And the first association, or like the first association someone has with typing an email somewhere, is confirming that action or sending that email address somewhere. So that's why you want to keep them together, right? So this makes way more sense. This is logically connected. These are logically connected too, but not as much as these, right? You want to reflect whichever has closer logical relationship. You want to also have, make them have a closer visual relationship, if that makes sense. Let's just see how this looks if we add rounded corners. I know we want to keep this simple, but maybe just a tiny bit, like, I don't know, 4 could work. Just to round them off a little bit, and maybe add a shadow to the button just to make it pop more, right? So I'm gonna add Y coordinates, I'm gonna blur it more, and also I'm gonna check clip content on this button so that I can edit the spread, right? This makes the shadow a little bit smaller than the button, which makes it look more realistic in my opinion. So yeah, let's just play around with these values a little bit, and yeah, you have a button and a form field that looks really good, I think, right? I'm gonna maybe add some padding, 20 and 20 on both of these so that they are prominent, and then maybe also select these texts, Shift A, press Enter, fill container on both of these, and Shift Enter again, and you got yourself a responsive group basically, right? But we're not gonna have to use auto layout that much for this, since it's very simple. One thing or two things that three things that I think are missing. First of all, I think we could do a little design element that would be like, let's just duplicate this one, the headline, and type in newsletter name, right? So what does this mean? Why am I doing this? Essentially, the reason why I'm doing this is because like another UX principle is that when people are perceiving a user interface, they are scanning from top to bottom and then left to right. And whenever you have any object that is more important or in the logical hierarchy, like higher, you want to put it higher in the position of these, right? Basically, if you have like a window that is prompting the user to join a newsletter, then what is the most like semantically, logically most important is the actual newsletter name, right? So if we were to analyze this in terms of like the logical structure, you would get newsletter, like this would be the newsletter. Then from the newsletter, you get an action related to a newsletter, and that would be joining the newsletter. And then related to that, you would get this specific window that would enable users to take this action, and so on, right? So the newsletter, actual newsletter, is like really the highest thing you can think of in this like mini universe of logical relationships. So that's why we are putting this at the very top, right? And then another thing that I think is missing is something about like privacy policy. Maybe people wanna, they wanna make sure that their info is safe. So I'm gonna just add a link to privacy policy. I'm gonna underline this, auto width, decrease the font size because it's not as important to like, I don't know, 12. It is still like absolutely important, but not in the context of this specific interaction. We wanna give people the option to check this, but at the same time, it's not like the first thing you want them to notice. This is not to say that you want to scam your users, but it's just to provide an easier navigation, right? The first thing people usually think about is why should they join the newsletter and not if their data is safe. That's like further down the road of consideration, right? And we could also, just to improve this, even we could say, instead of like privacy policy, which is really dry and unfriendly, we could say your data is safe, right? Just to assure people that, hey, everything's all right. So yeah, and then I'm gonna select this, this, and this, Shift A, and I'm gonna go to like 24, something like that. And then I am going to I'm gonna then take this out of this frame and I'm gonna add a fill, right? And then add a padding. So basically, we, kind of recreated this again, but now it's simpler if we want to add more elements that it's gonna automatically adjust. This one is not gonna automatically adjust, and I'm gonna remove that. And so bonus points if you can tell what's missing right now. So what is missing in this modal window? Now that I look at it, it's not that obvious. It's a close icon, right? You wanna give people the option. You always wanna give your users options, and you wanna give them flexibility and ability to revert an action. You don't want to force them to do anything, you want to give them a choice. And that's why we are going to create a close icon. And how I did this was using the pen tool, clicking once, holding shift, clicking twice, and then enter, then selecting this, Command D to duplicate, and Shift H to flip. And we got a close icon, right? Very simple. Sorry, sometimes I just keep explaining stuff and I don't explain what I'm currently doing, just explaining the logic behind that. So I'm gonna select this, Command X, select this window, Command V, and then this is not the place you wanna put your close icon, right? Your closing feature. You wanna go to absolute position and then press Option D and Option W to move it all the way over here, and then maybe use like shift and arrows to position that to a position that feels right. Okay, and we also want to keep this constraint to right and top so that when we resize this thing, it stays at the right and at the top. And then we're just gonna round these off a little bit, like again, maybe 6, very subtly, so that it's not completely sharp, but not also rounded. I'm gonna also rename this to modal window dash newsletter pop-up, and then I am going to add a shadow, and this shadow is again going to be a drop shadow. I'm also gonna go for clip content to be able to decrease the spread, and I'm going to increase the blurring, increase the Y, increase the blurring again, and we got ourselves a nice little shadow, right? So this is our very simple newsletter pop-up that I think all, in terms of content, that I think all newsletter windows, pop-up windows should have these. You want to make it clear to the user what are they signing up for. You want to give them the option to find out whether their data is safe. You want to give them the option to close, and you want to give them the option to just type in their info and then click submit, right? So that would be the second phase. The second phase is now finished. We have set up the visual, structure of this. We have defined how everything looks. Now we're going to move on to the third phase, where we are actually going to set up the interaction. So remember this little red area I'm gonna actually duplicate this and position that somewhere around here. I'm gonna make it larger, significantly larger, like, I don't know, this. Maybe move it even further down, approximately the middle, as we mentioned previously. And now, let's go to prototype, and then let's select this area and connect the area to this frame. And what we are going to go for in this interaction is not on tab, but mouse enter. Mouse enter, and it's not going to be navigate to, but it's going to be open overlay. And we are going to open the overlay that is modal window. It's going to be positioned in the center. Yes, that's what we want. It's going to be also, there's going to be some background behind the overlay. Let's say 25% opacity on a black background. And the animation could be like move in, probably from the bottom. Let's try that. It's not gonna be 3000 milliseconds, but more like 500 milliseconds, just so the interaction feels, you know, more natural. And that's it. So what we're gonna do now is I'm just gonna launch the prototype and see what we have right now. And we launch this with a mobile phone, which is something we don't really want. We are going to go to prototype settings, and under device we're gonna go for none. Okay, so now we should be able to see this, which again is not really what we need. We're gonna go for fit width so that we actually have this all the way to both sides. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm scrolling down, and look at this, there is some red area. What's gonna happen when I hover my mouse over this? I'm continuing to scroll, and there you go. We have a newsletter pop-up modal window that says join our newsletter. If you're interested in the topics discussed in the article, you're also gonna love our newsletter. Join now. And yeah, this is great. But also at the same time, I can't scroll anywhere, I can't close the window, I can't do anything. Right? So if I were a user and this would happen to me, I would be very upset right now, or at least very frustrated. So we need to obviously also give the user the option to close this overlay, right? So I'm gonna select this icon, then I'm gonna click on interactions, and still in the prototype mode, interactions, on click, then we have a handy feature that says close overlay, and we need precisely that, close overlay. And then when we go back to this prototype and then reset this prototype, we are starting at the very top again. I'm scrolling down, and then boom, we have this. That's awesome, but I don't want to join the newsletter, so I'm gonna close this and then attempt to continue reading the article. But there's a problem, right? Something that I actually haven't realized when putting together the structure. So this is something that we want to sort out. When I close this and then I move into this area again with my mouse, it opens again. So how could we solve this? Right? Let me think about this. This could be solved through removing actually the overlay interaction and approaching this in a slightly different way. So I'm gonna remove this interaction, right? I'm gonna then duplicate this page. You have like a second page right here. And then I'm going to remove this area from the new page, right? What I'm gonna do then is create another frame that is 1440 by 900. So 1440 by 900. And then I'm going to set the background to black with 25% opacity. I'm gonna place the modal window inside of this frame right in the middle, and then I'm going to rename this frame to modal window container. I'm then going to place this modal window container into this frame and just make sure it's centered by pressing Option H and then Option W to align that to the top, right? This is what we get. And then actually what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna copy this and paste that here as well, right? But what I'm gonna do here is move this window all the way to the bottom, almost outside of this frame, right? So that it's basically outside of this frame, right? And then I'm gonna set the opacity of the fill to 0, right? So that it's not visible. I'm then going to select both of these, and then under prototype, I'm gonna set position, under position, I'm gonna set that to fixed, stay in place. And then when I select this area again, go to prototype and connect this area to the second page, and I'm gonna go to mouse enter, navigate to page, and this animation is gonna have to be smart animate, right? Let's test what happens now. Let me reset this. We get a behavior where when we hover with our mouse over this red area, the red area disappears and this modal window flies in from the bottom. Maybe we're gonna move this bit more towards the top. So let me just move this a little bit more towards the top, right? Reset, and let's test this again. And yeah, we get this behavior. So not only can you now scroll further down the page, so it's an even more flexible solution, but it actually works. So let me just select this again, this icon, and then I'm going to remove this interaction, close overlay. I'm going to instead connect that back to the first frame, right? On click, navigate to page, Smart Animate, ease out. So now let's test if this works, and it doesn't. So what does this mean? This actually means that we have to duplicate the first page again and then redirect this interaction to go here, and then we remove this area from the page. So now everything should finally work, right? So I'm closing this, continuing to scroll, and nothing pops up anymore, right? I'm going to reset the prototype again. And when I reset this prototype, I'm again able to launch this, right? Go further down the page, close it again, and then continue without again launching this. This launches precisely once. Unfortunately, I had to improvise here for a little bit, so hopefully this is a good solution, good enough solution. So when I reset now and then go here, I get this behavior, beautiful. So now phase 3 is complete. That's awesome. And now let's move on to phase 4, where we just add a little bit of interactivity. So let me just duplicate this whole newsletter. Let me actually turn this into a component. And then let me actually just take this, your data is safe, and then make it really likable, like this. Then also this close window, let me also change the opacity all the way down to like 20, and then let's create a bunch of states. So I'm going to create the first variant. I'm going to also add an auto layout towards the right. So this state is going to have this, your data is safe, highlighted. So it's going to be like darker, right? It's going to be this dark gray. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this object, go to prototype, and then connect that to this state, right? And I'm going to say, while hovering, change to property 1, variant 2, smart animate, let's say 230 milliseconds. Then I'm going to create another variant where the form field is going to be highlighted, right? So it's going to be a bit darker. It's going to be like, the text is also going to be darker, but at the same time, the your data is safe is not going to be darker. So I'm going to set that to this color that we have in the first state, which is this. So this is the state where we highlight the form field, not this, right? Then I'm going to create another variant, but starting from the first default one, right? So plus over here, I'm going to also move that to the end. This one is going to have the button highlighted, which means we're going to add a more prominent shadow, less spread, more blur, more opacity, so that it looks like it's floating more, right? It's also probably going to be like a bit lighter, like slightly lighter gray, just a tiny bit. Then again, I am going to duplicate the first version again, move that to the end, and then I'm gonna highlight this icon. So this is gonna be fully opaque, and now we actually gonna have to define the interaction. So we have the first one, while hovering, change to this state, but then we're gonna have to select the form field and go while hovering, change to this state, right? So while hovering, then we're also gonna have to take the button and while hovering, go to this state, which has the button highlighted. And then finally, we're gonna have to select this and go while hovering, change to this state, right? So while hovering, remove the click interaction and then add the click interaction right here, which is gonna take us to this page. And now we just need to replace this and actually this here as well, which is hidden, with this instance, right? So let me just use an instance of this right here, Command X, select this, Command V, move this to the right, align that to the top, and remove this, and then also select this again and copy, paste that here and move that all the way basically outside of the frame, and also remove the initial modal window. And now one last thing I have realized, we have to fix this interaction from on click to hovering. So let me just select this button, go to prototype, and then instead of click, this is gonna be while hovering. And now let's test this out. So here I am browsing through the page, I get to this section, this pops up, I can hover over these individual elements, right? You can see how they are changing. I can hover over the button as well, which becomes a bit lighter and with a more prominent shadow, so it looks interactive. I can also hover over the cross, over the close icon, and I can actually use this to close it, and then I can go on with reading my article, right? So let's go through that again once more. Scroll, pop up, hover states, and closing. So that's it for today. If you'd like to download the source file for this, make sure to check the link in the description. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this video was useful. I hope you learned something new. If you did, please leave a like and let me know what would you like to see in a future video. So again, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one.